Help us to follow you and to be your people who lead others to know you. Gracious Lord, may you show us your signs and make us into signs for you. For this we pray. Amen. In our story today, we kind of finish out the traditional Christmas tale as we get to the Epiphany of the Lord, the Sunday on which we celebrate the three wise men coming to Jesus and coming to pay him homage and give him gifts. We often only think of there being three wise men because there are three gifts named. However, in reality, we have no idea how many wise men actually came. There could have been 2 with 3 gifts. There could have been 4 with 3 gifts. But I think what is important as we listen to this story is to hear how they are called, how they see God's signs, God's activity in the world, and how they respond. You see, in our story, we're told that these magi, these wise men, are way off in the east, and from that we can assume that they probably aren't Jewish, that they're probably not a part of the people that were expecting God's Messiah into the world, but instead that they are these outsiders, these other people who may not even believe in the God of Jesus. And in fact, there's a good chance that if they really are from the east and based on the fact that they're following a star, there's a good chance they may actually be practicing the Persian religion. And yet they see this star in the sky and they realize that God is doing something in the world, something special. And so they pack up their stuff and they put together a set of gifts and they begin to travel. Tradition tells us that they probably traveled for nearly 2 years. And so they travel and they arrive in Jerusalem and they arrive at the court of King Herod where they expect to find the one who was born to be king of the Jews. And yet Herod, the one appointed king, doesn't know where this child is. And he calls together all of his chief priests and they don't know where the child is. And they're kind of worried about who this upstart is, who this usurper is that's going to take away Herod's title, that's going to become the king of the Jews. The priests are worried about their power, and Herod is worried about his throne, and so they devise a plan. And he calls the Magi back in, and he tells the Magi, if you find him, come back and tell us so that we can come and worship him too. Well, the Magi set off again, and they head to Bethlehem, the birthplace of the great King David, the once great ruler of Israel, the place where the prophets spoke of the king being born. And there they come upon a house, and they find Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus. And they know from the star overhead that this is the place. This is where God is leading them to. This is where God's signs all point. And they come in and they worship Jesus. And they offer him gifts for a king, gifts for a God, and gifts for a sacrifice. These wise men, these men who know very little about the Jewish faith, seem to have this incredible wisdom and understanding about who Jesus is and what he means to the world. These men who have no reason to know that he is king, know that he is a king. These men who have no reason to know that he is God, somehow know that he is God incarnate. And these men, who as far as we know aren't around 33 years later, somehow also know that his life is leading up to a great sacrifice. His life is leading up to his death on the cross. They have seen the signs of God's presence in the world, and they have responded. We're told at this point that the wise men choose not to return to Herod after having a vision of what Herod plans to do, and they head back home. Jesus and Mary and Joseph, meanwhile, decide to pack up and leave and head to Egypt. And we find out shortly after this that Herod's true intentions, that what Herod planned to do if the wise men had came and told him where Jesus was to kill him. Because when Herod finds out that the wise men went to Bethlehem, he orders that all children under the age of 2 be put to death. An order that mimics the one that Pharaoh gave during the time of Moses' birth. Herod and the Pharisees did not see the signs of God in the world. They did not choose to follow it. And instead they choose to work against it. And they find themselves at odds with God, at odds with Jesus. The Epiphany of the Lord tells us about the importance of who God is, of who this Christ child is. The Epiphany of the Lord tells us that Christ is King, that Christ is God, and that Christ came to die for us. And it also tells us that Christ is not just some figure meant to be simply the Messiah of Judaism, but that Christ was meant to be the Messiah for the world, that he is not just the God of Judah, but he is the God of creation. He's not just the King of Judah, but he's the King of all nations, and he's not just dying for the sins of the Jewish righteous, but he's dying for the sins of the world. He is our sign. He is the one that we are called to follow, the one that we are called to be in relationship with. And as we enter into that relationship, we are meant to be his signs in the world. The wise men had the benefit of a star. They had a benefit of the child Jesus being somewhere that they could find him. And they did. And even though we are 2,000 years removed from that moment and that space and that time, Jesus is still very much in this world, still someone that we can approach and we can come to know and come to find and come to love. The difference is now is there isn't a star to lead us to a specific place. Instead, God has made a people and fashioned them together to be the sign of Jesus in the world, to show the world that he is alive. And more importantly, that he is alive in us. And so as you find your way to the Christ child, as you find your way to knowing God more fully and to coming more completely into his presence, may you not only see the signs of those who are seeking that as well, but may you also be a sign for others that Christ is alive in the world, that Christ is King, that Christ is God, and that Christ died for all persons, because as God he so loved the world.